Hello, everybody. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach. I'm the founder of the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program, creator of Dream Business Academy, founder of No Hassle Newsletters, my extraordinary done for you newsletter program used by over 1,200 small business owners in 9 countries. But most importantly, today, I am the host of Dream Business Radio, now in its 10th year, and this is episode 527. So, welcome to a special live edition of Dream Business Radio with my special guest, Alexis Haselberger. Alexis, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So thanks so much for having me on, and congrats on reaching 527 episodes. That's amazing.
It's astounding to me, real quick. So when I started in 2009, podcasting I thought was just exploding. I'm like, oh, I'm so late to the game. And now there's not hundreds every day. There's like millions every day, it seems like. Anyway, hey, folks, this episode of Dream Business Radio is brought to you by the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program. That is my mastermind. If you're an entrepreneur or small business owner who is tired of slow to no growth in your business, if you're feeling overwhelmed and unfocused, especially today's episode you're going to love, and especially if you're interested in learning how to create multiple streams of revenue in your business, something I'm very good at, then check out the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program led by me, Captain Jim, at dreambizcoaching.com, dreambizcoaching.com. All right, let me tell you a little bit about Alexis and we'll dive right in. She is a time management and productivity coach who helps people do more and stress less. Now, it's a big title. We're going to find out if it's all marketing shenanigans or she's really good. I'm just kidding. I believe me, I check out all my guests more silly than usual. Her pragmatic yet fun approach helps people easily integrate practical, realistic strategies into their lives so they can do more of what they want to do and less of what they don't want to do, which is honestly, it's a cornerstone of having a successful life, is not doing more of what you don't want to do. Alexis has taught thousands of individuals to take control of their time and her clients, including a couple small entrepreneurial companies such as Google, Lyft, Workday, Capital One, Upwork, and more. Just to drop a few in there, Alexis. Wow, you've got some major clients. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I mean, it helps that I live in, very close proximity to Silicon Valley, I'll just say.
I know, right out there in San Francisco. Well, I always start out, of course, I get myself so excited when I interview people like you because I love to learn. It's one of the reasons I keep doing the podcast. It's what is that expression? The coach always learns more, or the host always learns more. But it's fascinating to me talking with people like you who have these specialties, because when you're an entrepreneur, you will typically start a business based on a skill or talent, something you know how to do. You turn it into a business. So you do that. Next thing you know, you need to learn about HR. You need to learn about marketing. You need to learn about all these different things. But no matter what goes on, most people, most entrepreneurs that start achieving some level of success, Alexis, is they start burning out or become overwhelmed. They're doing way too many things. So that's a whole conversation on delegating. But so I'm really interested in this topic. But before I get myself going down the questions I can't wait to ask you, tell us a little bit about your background. Because honestly, I know this to be true because a very loyal audience, they always tell me they love the journey and the inspirational stories behind entrepreneurship as much as the good stuff, so to speak. So were you a natural entrepreneur? Did you say, the hell with college, I'm going to start a business? Or did you go become a lawyer and then study time management?
So not at all. Like, I never thought I was going to become an entrepreneur. I have a pretty low risk tolerance. And so, I thought like, that doesn't quite jive together. Right. But I spent the first 15 years or so of my career working in early stage startups, doing HR, operations, legal, finance, like doing all of the things that weren't sales and engineering, basically.
Okay.
And so I was working in small, fast-growing companies. I saw people burning out all around me, left and right, just as you described, many times the founders of these companies, right? And I also had a couple kids along the way, and I realized that I was not interested in working, these crazy hours that I saw people like. I didn't want to be at the office at 10 p.m., even if I was playing ping pong, right? Like I wanted a life outside of that. And so I just started, I'm a total geek about things, right? And so I just started like, what are the strategies that I can use and how can I optimize my own time? And basically my goal was I want to do excellent work. I want to always be moving up, and I want to do it in 40 hours or less a week, right? And
40
so,
hours as an entrepreneur? How dare you?
oh, I work 35 or so right now.
Good for you. I'm
um,
there now, but that wasn't for the
yeah,
first 12 years, right?
totally, right? And so for me, that's like always my goal is how can I continue to produce really excellent work, but do so with the least amount of time and effort involved, right?
Good.
And people just kept coming to me for that type of advice. So even though that wasn't really my job title by any means, I was much more doing, operations and then interfacing with our accounting folks and our legal folks and, HR stuff, all of that stuff. Um, People kept coming to me for help with like their task lists, right? Or, at a lot of different companies I worked for, they were like, "Hey, we need to like streamline these processes. Could you help us do that?" Right? And so
Mm.
I would do this kind of stuff. And eventually I worked for a CEO who said, "Hey, do you think that you could do a productivity workshop for our whole company? Just base it
Wow.
on the things you already do." And I said, "That sounds like so much fun. I would be happy to do that, right? This sounds very exciting." And I think that actually was the spark for me that I said like, "Wow, this is like a skill set I have, but I didn't really think about. It was kind of ancillary to everything else, right?"
That's
And
typically the road of entrepreneurs though, right? I mean,
yeah,
we all kind of weave in path and then we kind of find something. Your terminology was you were a geek at it, but I
yes,
think when people get really passionate about either a certain part of their job or a certain function that they're good at. I had
yeah,
no idea I was going to be a coach 20 years ago. I just started
right,
creating businesses and then people
yeah,
said, "Well, how are you doing that?" So one thing led to another, right? So
right.
at what point then after the CEO asked you to do this, did you decide to go out on your own?
So then, like maybe 2 or 3 years later, that startup went out of business, as
Oh.
as 90% of startups do. And I just thought to myself, the people have kept coming to me for this type of time management productivity stuff. It's something I really get a kick out of. And it's
Mhm.
something that feels like there's it's just people don't learn it in school, right? It's either
Right.
like you have either you're someone like me who has really developed these skills over time because you really wanted them, right, or needed them, as the case may be. When you're like a mom of two small kids with a full-time job, you need these skills, right?
Right.
And then I realized like, oh, there is a product market fit here somehow, some way. Like I don't know exactly what that will be. I didn't know that I would be a coach or that I didn't know I would have online courses. I didn't know what would happen. I just was like, I'm gonna start writing about all the things I know and then see if I can somehow turn this into a business. Like see what makes sense to share with other people and to get other people to a transformation where they are coming in overwhelmed, overworked. Just like you said in the beginning about entrepreneurs who achieve some
Mhm.
level of success and then realize how burnt out they are, I would say 100% of my clients are people who I would consider very successful, but have done so through brute force,
Right. You
right?
know what? So what's interesting is, first of all, I know it's going to be a fantastic interview, and we got another 22 minutes to go. But so folks, a little behind the scenes. I always meet with my guests for a couple minutes before we go live, and I said, "Don't give me any two-word answers, or I'll run out of questions." Well, I've just answered one question. We're at 10 minutes, so Alexis has a great volume of knowledge, and she's obviously passionate about it. So, Alexis, one of the things I do when I'm preparing for an interview like this is I go to a website or I look for your blog. Your blog is amazing. I mean, like outstanding. It literally made my job very easy. So, which shows that you totally understand about social media and content marketing and things like that. So anyway, tip of the hat to you there.
Thank you.
So I wrote down some of these. All I did is write down the titles, and I'm gonna just have you riff on them a little bit. But even though I don't want any two-word answers, don't give me 2,000 word answers because we'll run out of time.
Okay. Cut
So
me off.
anyway,
You need to cut
so
me off. Cut me
I
off.
will, believe me, I'll interrupt you. Okay, here's one that I was really fascinated. Why I want quiet quitters on my team. What is a quiet quitter?
So quiet quitting, if you have it, like it's just all the right. Everyone's talking about quiet quitting these days, quiet quitting. And when I first heard this term, I was like, what the heck is this? Right. Honestly, I just thought this must be if you just like stop showing up to your job and you wait until you stop getting a paycheck or something. Right. Turns out quiet quitting is just a negative rebranding of boundaries. Like
Ah,
quiet quitting is just doing your job, doing it well, but not being available at all hours of the night and day. And so I want those people on my team because I want people to have full lives and I want them to not burn out.
So a
And
quiet quitter is somebody who says, "I'm no longer gonna do this." Now, is the quiet part, you don't make big announcements, you just turn off your phone at night, or you just
yeah,
make yourself unavailable?
exactly, right? It's
Okay,
like basically saying like, "You know what? I used to be at your beck and call, and I'm taking a little bit of control back, and so I'm not gonna I mean, maybe you're saying, like, putting an out of office reply on or something like that, but yeah, you're
right.
not making a big announcement."
Very cool. Okay, I got that. So, another blog post is why your instinct when you get busy is probably wrong. Now, I'm guessing the instinct is buckle down, work harder. Is that the instinct you're talking about?
Well, the instinct is actually it's a little bit of that, but the instinct is actually that most people, when they get busy, they throw away all their systems, right? You get busy and you're just like, okay, I just have to spend all my time doing the things. And you let planning go by the wayside. You're like, I don't have time
Hmm.
for planning. But what happens when we do that is that we are now in a position where it's like we're standing in front of a tennis ball thrower that's like throwing the tennis balls at us. And instead of stepping to the side to see what's going on, we just stand there trying to like bat away all of the balls. And it leaves us more exhausted and we don't get the right things done.
Wow. That's awesome. A good friend of mine, mindset coach Melanie Benson, told me this. I forget how far back this goes. I mean, probably more than 10 years. But back when I'm like 80-hour a week type guy,
Yeah.
getting up at 4:30 in the morning and just doing the whole, eating a 2.5 minute lunch at best at the desk, right, and just cranking, cranking, cranking. And she goes, Jim Palmer, you need to take some time off. I don't know why she was called me Jim Palmer instead of just, but Jim Palmer, you need to take some time off. And I'm like,
Yeah,
can't afford to right now. She said, you can't afford not to, right?
exactly.
And so instead of a week, I promised to take one day off. And I remember this, it was in August, and I drove up to Eagles training camp up in Allentown. And instead of, which I totally enjoyed, so that felt good, but I also took my camera and shot a video for at the time, Newsletter Guru TV. And but getting out of the office, it was really a turning point for me. And I have one of my memes is I never had a big idea looking at a screen. It's always I like
Mm,
the mountains or the ocean or just driving, but
yeah.
never in the I've never come up with a great business building idea in my office.
I 100% agree. I come up with all of my ideas while I'm running,
Ah, so
pretty
it's
much.
outside the office. There you go.
Yeah.
What and why do you think that is? Are you listening to music, or I'm just curious what you're when you're running, do you have nothing going on and just processing thoughts, or
I am often honestly listening to an audiobook or listening to a podcast, but then
okay.
I will like something will spark. I'm like, oh, there's like a connection that I'm making. And then I'll stop for a second to like write down what my idea was so that I don't forget it by the time I get back from my run. But I
Yeah.
think that what's happening is when you're using your body in a way that you are, you're sometimes it's like you get an idea when you're doing the dishes or in the shower or something like that. There is some part of your mind that is just not actively focused, right?
Okay.
And that part of your brain is kind of noodling on all of that stuff and making connections that we don't make when we are, say, sending out an invoice from our computer.
Right. Um, so a couple more that I want to ask you about. Slippery time syndrome. What is slippery time syndrome?
Yes, slippery time syndrome is when things just it just falls through your grasp, right? It's like you're holding sand and it's somehow leaving. And it is really related to distractions that we have all around us. So there was a study done out of UC Irvine maybe 10 years ago about distractions and interruptions. And what happens is that when we get distracted or interrupted, which the time of the study was like every 11 minutes, now it's probably more with Slack and Teams and all these things, that it takes us on average 23 minutes to refocus after any kind of ping ding interruption.
Really?
Yes. And so this study showed that most people spend about a third of their workday just trying to recover from distractions, getting distracted, trying to get back to what they're doing. And this is how we get to the end of the day and we're like, I don't understand. I've been working all day. Why did I not cross anything off my to-do list?
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people I've interviewed other kind of time management experts, so to speak, and they talk about time blocking. Okay, I'm going to write for an hour, then I'm going to do this. And I totally get what you say, because if I write for an hour and then I can't just jump into something else,
Mhm.
I can go walk around the house, or I used to walk around the marina or do something, but there has to be something. You can't just go from one function part of your brain to another. So that's what
Mhm.
you're talking about.
Yeah, well, all and just think about all the pings and dings that we get from email notifications or, things that we have control over, even though we don't take control over quite often, right?
Yeah. So speaking of writing, when I was so I've written well, 6 books and then 6 ebooks.
Yeah.
But when I was writing the first book took me like almost a year to write. And then I got over myself trying to be a perfectionist, which was an unattainable goal.
Yep.
But the last 3 or 4 books were written and published in 60 days, for one thing. But it's not just that I got comfortable with an occasional, gaffe, but it's because of what I considered properly setting up the zone, right?
Mhm.
Or the desk or whatever. So to me, um, for different tasks, I realize that my brain has different. What I'm trying to say very clumsily is I could write much better early in the morning. I can't write during the day, and I can't write at
Yeah.
night because I get tired. So
Yep.
I would wake up the night before when I'm in book writing mode. I would clear
Mhm.
my desk. I didn't want to come down and look at anything. I wanted a clear desk, just the keyboard, because I'm just
Yep.
writing in Word, even like this.
Yep.
And I wouldn't open anything other than Word. I wouldn't like open Chrome or anything. I wouldn't put on music because then I'll start humming a tune. I would
Yep.
just sit there and write while my head was clear. And it would usually be clear for about an hour and a half.
Mhm.
Then I'd usually hear, Stephanie or the kids when they used to be home getting ready
Yeah.
for school or church, or not church, school or work. And then I would switch, right? Then I would transition. I'd go paddle my kayak and then get ready for work.
Yeah.
This is probably the longest question ever, but I'm getting to the point where, one of the blog posts you shared was how to set up your desk for success. That's what
Mm.
I thought of.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about that, unless I covered it for you.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right that we have to find those situations and the circumstances that work really well for us. And I
Yeah.
think we're very smart to have not like started out writing without checking anything else, without checking your email, without whatever that is. And so when I think about setting up, like it might be different for everybody. When I think about like ideal desktop setup, it's like the only things on my desk are a beverage, a pen, a notebook, and my keyboard, right?
Mm,
Because everything else is distraction.
that's it.
And then if I'm like thinking about the actual desktop in front of me, you really have to think about that as well. Because if you have email open, your brain is just going to email all day long. If you have Slack open, that's what's happening. And so for me, I set up calendar on one side, task list on the other side, and what I'm focused on, what I'm doing right in the middle. I mean, I also have a 3 monitor setup, right? So if you don't have that, you might
Wow.
feel
Command
so good,
Central.
right? But but I set it up so that like I can see my calendar, I can see my task list, but that's it. Like email, Slack, all that stuff, it is closed if I'm not actively working on it.
Yeah, when I was writing my first book, I worked just for a short period of time with kind of a book writing expert, and that's where they first, I think I might have first heard the term time blocking. And
Mhm.
so I would set aside time like 10 to noon or something like that. And that's when I started learning about when my brain is
Yeah.
conditioned or most receptive. Because if I said, okay, it's 10 a.m., I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write my book. And I said,
Mhm.
whoa, is that the mail truck? And then I go out and get the mail.
Right, right.
And then I would look at the bird crap on my car. I'd go in and get Windex on the way in. I said, well, let me just put the clothes in the dryer. So while I'm right, and for an hour, I would fart around and not write my book. And that's why
Yeah.
I said, I can't do that. And that's when the other thing which helped me, and I think as a coach, I'm always processing and thinking of ideas for my clients. But if I happen to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning for whatever reason, and
Mhm.
an idea pops in my head, I have to write it down, because I guarantee when I wake up at 6, it's like a dream. It's usually gone. But so to me, I don't fight that anymore. It's like if I wake up and I got some ideas, I just got a little pad next to my bed and I write it down and just pray I can go back to sleep. But that's when the brain, I guess, is most fertile, or something like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't wake up in the middle of the night, but I
Well, you're
will
not old
say
enough yet, but you'll get there.
we'll get there, I'm sure. But I think that what you really have hit on is writing things down the second that they come to you, no matter where you are. And like I said, I
Mhm.
like if I am running and I have an idea, I stop, I put it into my task system, and I start running again. And
Mm.
the reason for that, which is probably the reason that you're doing the same thing in the middle of the night, is that not only will you forget it, but also you won't be able to go back to sleep as easily if you don't write it down because your mind
Ah,
will ruminate on the thing. I often tell people, like, do a brain dump before you go to bed, right? Or if you wake up in the middle of the night, do a little brain dump because your mind will ruminate on that stuff unless you get it out.
when I would share what I shared with you with a client or something, I would sometimes call it the cat syndrome because, like, if you wake up and the cat's scratching to go outside, I could
Mhm.
try and go back to sleep, but if I don't get up and let that cat out, I'm not going back to sleep. So
Right.
that's when I learned to accept it and not
Yeah.
fight it. You
Yeah.
have a blog post, Alexis, about do not chronically overcommit.
Mhm.
I'm guessing that's where the stress comes in, right?
I mean, that's a huge source of stress, right? Is that we don't plan, right? So we're just saying yes to whatever comes our way, and especially for entrepreneurs, this is very difficult because when you're in the early stages of your business, it behooves you to say yes to as many opportunities as possible.
Sure.
And then you reach a certain levels of success. And now saying yes is a detriment to your success. Now you need to say no more often than you're saying yes because you need to focus and because you already have, clients coming in and business coming in. And so even with the clients that you may have right now, I find that so often something comes to us and before we even think through, do we have time for this? When do we have time for this? When are we going to do this work? We say yes, right? We don't think about it. And that because we look at our calendar 6 months from now and we're like, it's free, there's nothing there. Not realizing that we are going to be just as busy in 6 months as we are right now. It's just not currently reflected on our calendar.
Right. Um, well, let's talk about calendar. I think I saw one in there about how to take control of your calendar. So I work very blessed. I work 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and
Yeah.
it worked really great when we were still on our boat because we could travel Friday through Monday and then just find a marina with good Wi-Fi
Yep.
and stay there. But I still work 3 days a week because that's what
Yeah.
I like. But even with 3 days a week, even before I switched in 5 days, 3 days, my calendar kind of runs my day.
Hmm. Hmm.
Coaching clients are booked, interviews like this are booked,
Yep.
and they show up as a certain color, telling me it's a hard appointment. You can't slack off. And then
Yep.
I also have different colors for things to do. The
Hmm.
calendar looks very full, but yet I feel organized, or is the calendar just controlling me too much? What did you mean by that?
So, what I really mean by kind of taking control of your calendar is specifically related to meetings, right? So, I think my calendar sounds a lot like yours. I have
Hmm.
one color for meetings, which is like obligations to other people, and then I
That's
have
it.
one color that is my time blocking, that is obligations to me, right? And so, if you look at my work days, it's booked from 9 a.m. to whatever time I'm right. It's like booked all day. So
Hmm.
it can look very full, but I agree with you. It's like it runs my day. What most people have trouble with in their calendars, and I think when you're an entrepreneur, you have a little more control over this than you think, is that your time is taken up by all of these meetings, many of which don't need to be meetings, many of
Ah,
which you don't need to be at because you can delegate to somebody else, many of which could be shorter or could be less frequent. And so I call it like the 5 R's of calendar management. So
okay.
the first one is review. Like, look at what's on your schedule and actually know. I mean, I had a client who did this the other day, and she had 34 recurring meetings that were regularly on her schedule,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
I also had a client once who had 40 hours of recurring meetings a week. So it's like, no wonder why he's not having the ability to get other things done. So first, like, see what's there. Then the second R is to remove. So are there any meetings there that you don't need to be at, right? You can send somebody else from your team, or maybe this is a meeting that doesn't need to happen. It could be an email, right? Like, let's
Or get
get
the notes.
get the notes, right? Um, the next step is to reduce. So can we reduce, like, a meeting that's on the calendar for an hour? Does it need to be an hour? Could it be 40 minutes, right? We got a meeting that's 30 minutes. Could it be 20? Where can we reduce? Like, are we having a meeting every single week that probably only needs to happen once a month? Where can we reduce? Then we say, where can we rearrange? So the fourth R, right? Because now let's say we've removed some things, we've shortened some things, we've reduced the frequency. Now our calendar has gone from looking like a brick wall to looking like Swiss cheese, right? And
Yeah.
you've got all these little holes of time that feel kind of useless because you've only got half an hour between this meeting and the next. And so rearranging things and then finally repeat. Like, our calendars are additive. And so we probably need to do this every 6 months or so to make sure that our time is being spent in the best way possible, not in a bunch of meetings that we go to that we then leave feeling like, well, that was a waste of my time.
Very interesting. You mentioned commitments to yourself. I think was that your
Mhm.
terminology there?
Yeah.
Is that exercise, eating? I mean, what are the commitments to yourself?
So that's actually, so it is some of those things, but it
Okay.
is the way that I just refer to time blocking, right? So I have a toggleable time blocking calendar, and that calendar kind of, it's like it overlays with my meeting calendar, and that is showing me like what I have planned to do on any given day. So, after us talking here today, after this interview, I have, a block, I think, of a half an hour where I'm going to be processing any emails that have come in, over the last few hours. And then after that, I have a block where I'm going to be, creating some new content. And so that is what I consider commitments to myself, because
Hmm.
so often we just let whatever comes our way take up our time. And then we wonder, well, why hasn't that book that I've been trying to write written?
That's right. Um, well, I suspect once the interview's over, you're gonna be thinking how awesome the interview was, but you can do whatever you want to do. The commitments, and by the way, you mentioned repeating things. So, for
Mm,
example, this is how much I need my calendar because when I have an interview at 3 o'clock, like we're doing now,
yeah,
and it sometimes changes, I will block out the half an hour or an hour before because if it's not blocked out, a coaching call could come in, and I'm like, then I have no time to prepare. So I
right,
actually have prepare for live DBR,
yeah,
Dream Business Radio. It's on there. And
yeah,
things that have happened every Friday morning or Thursday morning is when I share the new podcast. That
mhm,
is an appointment on my calendar for, well, since 2009, every single Thursday, because
yeah,
I forget.
yeah.
So it can be very handy, but I could see it could be overwhelming too. We technically have 4 more minutes. If I can keep you maybe 2 or 3 minutes longer, I got a couple more questions I want to
Yeah,
ask you.
totally fine.
Okay. I read something on your blog about a hard reset. I know sometimes you just got to give your computer a hard reset. What do you mean for yourself?
So what I mean is that oftentimes, like, we're using a task system or we have a method for tracking the things that we're doing, and then it gets out of whack for some reason. Like maybe we stop using it for a while because we got too busy, right? We just start standing in front of the tennis balls instead of planning our time.
Yep.
Or maybe we got sick, or we were on vacation and now like everything looks overdue. And it's just scary for us to even look at it. And so, what I have my clients do, what I always share is that when you feel that urge to stop looking because you just don't want to know what's in there, that actually means that you got to double down and just block a time, like take an hour, sit there, open up your task system, face it, and start planning for the future. Because when we leave things in this overdue status, it is very stressful for us. And also, it doesn't reflect reality. We can only do things in the future. We can't go back and do things in the past. And so we just need to kind of reset to a zero state to move forward.
Hmm. Yeah. Easier said than done, I would think, right? How did you first come up with that? And did it take you a while to like make it effective?
Yeah, well, I think like this doesn't really happen to me so much anymore, but it happens to my clients when they're in the learning process of managing their time, managing the things that they have to do. And so over time, enough people asked me, "Hey, what happens if I let it get kind of out of whack? Like what happens if I
Hmm.
ignored it for a while?" And so I came up with a set of things to do. And the first thing is block some time to deal with it, because otherwise you're just going to be having the pain of digging yourself out for weeks instead of like
Right.
one fell thing. And then it's like a set of processes. It's like, first, go through your email and make sure that anything that is a task gets in your task list, right?
Yeah.
Go through Slack, same thing. Once you've gotten all the inboxes, then look at your task system and start planning it out. When are you going to do what? So that now you're looking at a realistic day for tomorrow and a realistic week for next week without having all that baggage.
Right. Very cool. Okay. Last question I want to ask you, and I thought you might have written this blog post for me, but you probably wrote it for my longtime listeners, Phil Brakefield and Jeff Herring. Can you teach an old dog new tricks?
You 100% can. Everybody can learn. And I think that this is something that comes up so frequently with when I meet with people is they say, "Well, I'm just not an organized person. I've never been an organized person. It's just not in my nature and I feel really bad about it and I don't believe I can change it."
Yeah.
All of this stuff is just skills. It's skills you can learn. It's skills you can learn with practice, because everybody can learn new skills with practice.
And you know what? Part of me just, likes to conduct an interview in a fun way, but
Yeah.
it really has to become that important to you also,
Mhm.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you get a diagnosis of, you're pre-diabetic or you're overweight or whatever, and you start to see the real results instead of just looking at the scales, like this is really affecting my health. That then it takes on a higher level of importance, and you do it.
Mhm.
I learned early on, seriously, I was one of these guys who just work, 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 worked. I'll sleep later when I die type
Yeah.
thing. And I mean, I survived it, but it was like, you sometimes feel like you're just nothing's ever going to happen to you, right?
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
something does,
Mhm.
and now you have to figure out another way around it.
Yeah.
In my book, Decide, I had a chapter: learn to delegate or stay small forever.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs have this, I can do it better, cheaper, faster than anybody else. So why would I pay somebody else to do what I can do myself? Well,
Right.
my rule of thumb now is if I hate to do it, it probably will never get done. It keeps moving further down. And if there's something that I can pay somebody 10, 20, $30 an hour to do, yet I'm working up here. But if I'm
Mhm.
doing this task, I'm worth 20 or $30 an hour. And that's not a good place to be.
I
So
100% agree.
yeah, so it really has to do a lot with what level of importance does it take on, because then you'll actually find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And what I say a similar version, although maybe more crass of what you've just said, which is like within an organization, the person who should be doing a thing is the lowest paid yet still capable person to do that thing.
Yeah, that's good, and I'm sure you've cleaned that up for my show, so thank you, but
Well, that's kind of a crass version too. It's like not a nice way to say it, but it's like exactly that thing. Like you should only be doing as the CEO or an entrepreneur, you should be doing the things that only you can do and delegating everything else.
Yep. I'm going to try and dig in one more question because you
Okay.
answered that one brilliantly. So even when you feel stuck, I think is your awareness moving? Unpack that for me a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a great example of this. So oftentimes we say, I want to do something, and then we have a lot of trouble doing that thing, right? And so for your listeners, for those people, most people have had kids, and this is one that shows up all the time, right? If you have ever said to yourself, I want to stop yelling at my kids,
Mm,
right? And then what happens? First, for like the next 100 times, you will yell at your kids. And then after the fact, you'll be like, I was trying not to do that. Right. And then eventually your awareness shifts up a little bit and you'll be like mid yell and you're like, okay, I need to stop. I need to take a breather. I wasn't trying to do this.
mm.
And then after 100 more times of that, before you start yelling, you will say, I need a break. I'm going to go calm down, take a deep breath in the bathroom before that word even comes out of your mouth. And so this is often what has happened in just any skill that we're trying to practice and learn. It's that our awareness is shifting from after the fact to before the fact. And we're not going to make significant progress until or feel as though we have made progress until we're at that end point, right? Where we're not doing the thing anymore or doing the thing we want to do. But that kind of spectrum that's happening, it's essential for getting there, right? We can't just go to the after the fact to before the fact at the same time.
Yeah, that reminds me of in the late 2000, well, 7, 8, 9, it's when I really started learning about internet marketing, things like that. And okay, so you should definitely blogging. That wasn't that new, but you should have a podcast. You should start doing videos. You should write a book. And there's all these things that you needed to do if you really want to have a successful business. And I think it was Dan Kennedy who said, it's not like, you go to your wall like in the hall sometimes, and there's like 5 light switches. You don't take the broom and go boom and put them all on at the same time. One
Totally.
of them may come on, the other, or it's like more like dimmer switches. One
Yeah.
will come on bright, and the others, and you keep going there. So it is a process. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't just change like that.
Yeah.
Um, Alexis, what a great man! I could talk to you for another half hour, but I know we both have things to do. What a fantastic interview! Now I know I want you to tell people how they can connect with you. I know just from my research, you have some kind of a group coaching program. So go ahead and tell people about that if you would.
Yeah, perfect. So people can connect with me on alexishaselberger.com, which hopefully you'll link to because no one will be able to spell it. Um, you can connect with me there. I do have a group coaching program called Time Well Spent that runs twice a year. And so I'm accepting people on the wait list right now for that. And it really takes you from feeling like overwhelmed and overworked to feeling in control of your time. over about a 10-week span. So that is a really great way to, to work with me if you want to. You can also go to my blog, and you can go to my website and sign up for my
Yeah.
blog. I will send that out to you.
Folks,
Uh,
the blog is really, I mean, seriously, and I don't just say this to blow smoke, it's a great blog. Well organized, and you can like scan a bunch really quickly and see which ones appeal to you. But yeah, that's the only reason I sounded smart today was because I went to her blog and prepared for the interview. Alexis, thank you so much. What a great guest today on Dream Business Radio Live.
Thank you so much. It's been a great chat.
Wonderful. Hey, folks, that wraps up this very special interview with my guest, Alexis Haselberger. I highly recommend you connect with her, follow her, learn from her, unless you just happen to enjoy working more and stressing more. So I guess there is, that's the other side of that coin. You can connect with me at getjimpalmer.com, getjimpalmer.com. If you're interested, again, in connecting with me and about 27 other smart entrepreneurs in the Dream Business Mastermind and Coaching Program, that is dreambizcoaching.com, dreambizcoaching.com. And finally, remember, if you'd like to get copies of all 6 of my Dream Business books, they are free now. It's part of my legacy building program. They are in Kindle at Amazon. Well, on Amazon, they're Kindle books. They're all free. Barnes & Noble is the Nook book, and they're also in the iBook store, totally free. It's my education to you. Again, part of my legacy building program. But until this time next week, he said easily, another fantastic interview. I am Captain Jim Palmer, the Dream Business Coach, and you take good care.